So we're talking about the mess America's in and the fact that pretty much everyone in America now cops to the fact that there's some serious problems. Of course, there's massive confusion about how those problems should get solved, and on top of that confusion, there's a lot of politics and power games and money games trying to control the way it gets solved. And again, looking back to where did it all start? I've mentioned certain things like the beginning of the revolution and the tax revolt against England, but it was more than that. Even though I do jokingly say it was the biggest tax avoidance, America was the biggest tax avoidance scheme in history. But there was more than that. The founding fathers were also pretty disgusted by several other aspects of British rule, one being that the king was also the head, not only the head of state, but the head of the Church of England. And they opposed and were very opposed to church and state combining or church affecting what happened in the state. So one of their original intentions was to create a country that was not ruled by the church, but was in fact a secular country, and hence we have the very deep and profound tenet in America of the separation of church and state, which, by the way, has failed miserably in so many ways, to the degree that today we will hear right-wingers and religious nutters saying that separation of church and state was to protect the church from the state, whereas in fact the truth is separation of church and state was to protect the state from the church. And with the election, particularly of George Bush and his wacko vice president, what we get to see is a coalescence of religious people in a voting bloc to put a president into power, and to have a president who says that beyond the Constitution, which he consistently broke, that he listened to a higher voice, and clearly he was talking to God, and in most rational countries that's considered a psychiatric problem, especially when you kill thousands and tens of thousands of people based on those voices. So along with that, what America had right from the start was an incredibly religious and Puritan streak, so that back to the founding fathers, you had people like Jefferson being attacked as a tool of the devil, as this satanic, evil, anti-God, anti-church man, and the church people, the so-called religious people, condemning him at every turn with the most vile epithets, both verbally and in sermons and in written newsletters. And that Puritanism is something that, in my experience, doesn't exist in any other Western country, to the point where over living in America for 18 years, I came to the conclusion that in fact America isn't a Western country. It shares many things that Western countries share, but at the most core level of cultural value and meaning, purpose and direction, it is not a Western country. In fact, it's its own country. It has succeeded in being different to everywhere else, and it definitely does not fit into the culture of Western countries. I grew up in Australia. Our neighbour New Zealand are Western countries, where even though we're not European, we have that European descent, as does America, but we've continued in that tradition in many ways, developing our own version of it, so that, you know, Aussies are pretty much seen as a very specific culture, very unique culture in the world, as are Kiwis. So America's developed its uniqueness, but outside of that realm of Westernism, and I'll probably talk about that at some more length. But where we're at today, and the other piece that the founding fathers seriously opposed with Britain was the idea of corporations. The Founding Fathers, in fact, hated corporations. They'd suffered at the hands of the East India Trading Company, which was the first true modern corporation. And so much so that in early America, corporations were so feared, not just hated, but feared, that when a corporation formed, it could only form for 20 years, and at the end of that 20 years had to present itself to the government to justify its continued existence. And usually what happened was it had to break up, its profits were dispersed, and then if people wanted to come together and form a similar company, they could do so, but the corporation had a very limited life. The reason that was that the Founding Fathers fully understood the danger and power of corporations to accumulate not just money but power and control, because corporations as entities don't have to die, and so they ensured that they died every 20 years, which was a shorter lifetime than human beings. Today, of course, corporations not only don't die, or American corporations not only do not die, and therefore endlessly accumulate power and control and endlessly pursue their own agendas, which are to make more profit, but on top of that have manipulated and eroded and corroded and corrupted the system to the degree that corporations now actually have more rights than American citizens, and the people who run the corporations are more protected from the law than any other American citizen. So not only do the corporations have more rights than American citizens, but the people who run them can run them pretty much ruthlessly, and if they do wrong, the corporation pays for it.